The fact this video is being made is a testament above all else that I obviously spend way too much time on Twitter. Granted, this extends past Twitter specifically too. Beyond that, you guys know Fire Emblem? You know, that one series that found its success and popularity thanks to its inclusion into the popular fighting game series called Super Smash Bros. Yeah, you got your guys like Marth, Ike, Robin, and more. Smash has always been a series focused on the crossover elements of games, especially Nintendo ones, and Fire Emblem has been one of the forefront series to consistently get more and more characters. The problem being no one online can shut up about it. There's one specific complaint regarding the Fire Emblem Smash debacle that sparked me wanting to make this type of video, but the more I look at it, it literally is just Fire Emblem encompassing the root of a lot of these one-off debates. Time and time again on social media, Twitter, Reddit, there's always some kind of discussion that involves Fire Emblem's existence in Smash. Now, am I some obsessed Fire Emblem fan ready to educate you all on why Fire Emblem deserves, quote-unquote, all these characters? No. Fire Emblem Heroes, the gacha mobile game, is literally the only Fire Emblem game I've played. Does that mean I instantly hate Fire Emblem in Smash every time it gets a new character? No. There's a sense of neutrality I have with Fire Emblem itself with Smash, some characters which I genuinely like, but holy shit, am I so tired of seeing what's essentially the same exact argument, narrative, general drama circulating online on a monthly basis at best. It's the idea there's so many people unironically thinking of some of the dumber reasons for why Fire Emblem characters have any hate towards them. Swords, anime, whatever, when that's not often the case. The fact that it's a constant returning topic. The idea there's a legion of people constantly boycotting Fire Emblem every single time it gets a new character, and it's never anything different. So let's vent out some mildly annoyed emotions in video form and pretend it'll make a difference in any capacity. And to be frank, I'm not trying to dismiss all the hate surrounding Fire Emblem. You guys know me, whenever there's a positive or negative perspective around something, I try to emphasize it's good to express both positive and even negative criticisms when done for good reason, and there are some good criticisms revolving around Fire Emblem that I'll touch on much later. But my main issue is there's usually more focus on the bad ones that are taken more seriously and thrown around more often. I touched upon several aspects of the Fire Emblem hate in my Smash Cycle video I made almost a year ago. It's there if you're curious. Today, though, we're going to talk about basically the whole thing. No knee-jerk reactions, no impulsive pointing fingers at, oh hey, they toxic because this, and this. This is a whole discussion on the general topic. I'm pretty sure anyone watching this that is a Smash fan doesn't need much social media interaction to know there's a stigma/discontentful aura surrounding Fire Emblem. It's the butt end of a lot of memes and jokes. The drama recirculates constantly. Everyone is aware there are at least some people out there that have a problem with Fire Emblem and Smash. But a lot of the time that drama surrounding it is both grossly misconstrued and overinflated. For instance, one topic surrounding Fire Emblem and Smash is the idea there are too many sword/anime swordsmen. This was the original topic that pushed me to make a video on something like this. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized with this and other complaints is that the root of a lot of these discussions has to do with Fire Emblem specifically. For example, too many anime swordsmen are just swordsmen was never a major talking point at all until Fire Emblem was brought in the equation. Am I saying this is one of the good criticisms? No. It's stupid, and I know for a fact most people watching this are not agree it's a stupid one. Like if you really wanted to break it down to the swordies in the game, or at the very least characters whose sword make up a majority of their moveset, to where calling them a swordie feels justified and reasonable. You have Link, Marth, Young Link, Roy, Meta Knight, Ike, Toon Link, Swordfighter, Lucina, Robin, Shulk, Cloud, Corrin, Chrom, Hero, Byleth, Sephiroth, Pyra, and Mithra. That's 19 Swordfighters at least. And if you really wanted to prattle over the semantics of the situation, there are at least 4 to 5 other considerations I've seen people make towards Ganondorf, Pit, and Dark Pit, Joker, and Steve. Ganondorf I kind of get. He uses a sword for his smashes, but the character's still largely derivative from Captain Falcon, so it's tough for me to really call him a swordie. Steve probably makes the most sense since he also uses a sword in his kit, but on the other hand, there's so much more to the character, and is not his primary game plan nor gimmick, that it's a much bigger gray area than looking at the Links, for instance. Pit and Dark Pit literally split their bows in half and use them since they act as blades as well. They're not even swords, it's 2 halves of a bow. I don't think this should be considered given this. And when you notice there are very few out there that group Joker in the mix because of his knife, which isn't a sword either, and makes up 3 moves in his whole kit. That's like if I call Greninja a swordie on account he uses water swords in Smash 4, or water kunai in Ultimate, or the Belmont swords because of their range of weapons being metal. Again, it's all semantics. It's a ridiculous fallacy, and it's one of the reasons why I'm sick of the Fire Emblem drama. But forget any arguments you can make for some of these. Forget all that. Let's ignore that. automatically assume the extra 5 characters I mentioned, they somehow do constitute as swordies. That's at most 24 total, if not 22 at least if you applied what I said. Whichever number you pick, even at most, that's still more or less a quarter of the actual roster now. Forget we still have 2 characters left who may or may not even have swords. If you boil down all the semantics around the swordy thing, not even remotely half the roster has swords. So the argument of Smash having too many swordsmen, period, isn't one that has legs to stand on. What's more is I see so often people making memes and quips about the swordy thing being all, Smash fans hating sword characters when Smash fans love a lot of swordies in the game, hello? This especially is where you notice this is specifically a Fire Emblem debate and not really a sword thing in general, because nobody was upset when Cloud and Sephiroth were added to the game, people were ecstatic as all hell, people find Shulk annoying to fight, but people liked/didn't mind his inclusion in Smash 4, people love Meta Knight, people love the Lynx, in spite of the fact their basic core structure is similar across all 3, like any discontent regarding swordies largely revolves around a handful of the Fire Emblem characters. Yes, even most Fire Emblem characters people are generally okay with, in the grand scheme, save for some minor bits here and there, which I'll talk about later. The worst thing people have with swordies is that if you're adding a character with a sword outside some specific mechanic, like limit, tippers, random magic spells, etc., you already have a general sense of how that character will play, because most sword characters have some vaguely similar moves across all of them. Curved upward sword swing for up air, sword swing overhead down for forward air, hard swing forward for F smash. Like, look at most Fire Emblem characters' up airs, theirs plus Shulk and Cloud's forward air, you'll see what I mean. Point is, Smash fans never hated swords just because swords, at most, they feel a slight tinge of creativity, being narrow and sparse because you know what to expect with a sword wielder. That's always been a meme people in and especially out of the community take as fact, only because most discontent surrounding characters is with Fire Emblem. And it's one thing for people to joke about swords, it's only a joke, but it becomes something else when it's overinflated to the point of making some believe there is a swath of Smash fans out there vehemently against the idea of a character having a sword, when that's not true at all. At the very least, me personally, I don't care about the weapon a character uses, I just care about the character. Another annoying point is when, while you have one side of Smash, whether for or against Fire Emblem, believing the sword thing or talking about the sword thing, and usually making others talk about the sword thing as well, on the opposite side, some of the Fire Emblem side thinks Smash fans are dumb and see Fire Emblem characters as clones of each other. And then you have posts like this, pushing the idea, despite that isn't true either. I don't even think this is a big talking point, like, at all, besides here. But at first glance, you look at the Fire Emblem cast, aesthetically, yeah, you put a black silhouette over all of them, they look similar. Lots of anime swords, people with blue hair. Granted, that doesn't really matter that much, but as far as them feeling samey or like clones, you could kind of see it. Lucina is literally Marth without the tipper. Roy was originally a pure clone of Marth, but is now Marth as a close-range melee character, and Chrom is Roy without the hilt sweet spot mechanic, and has slightly more range and a bad upbeat. And let's be honest here, most people count Echo Fighters as their own characters. Some will pretend they don't either for an argument/narrative, or some do because they genuinely do, though I personally don't see that often. But people generally separate Ken from Ryu, despite being an Echo, and for good reason. People even separate Lucina and Chrom from Marth and Roy, and they still make up a whole extra slot, and have slight differences that put them apart, even if those changes are extremely minuscule. Daisy, Dark Pit, Dark Samus, Richter. They're still generally grouped with their originals gameplay-wise because their differences are that inconsequential, but people still acknowledge them as their own characters. I don't know about you, but I see people treat Daisy or Dark Pit as more of a character than Alph or the Kupoints, on top of the fact nobody ever tried making an argument of clones not really being characters until now. People fully acknowledge the Melee's clones, in spite of them taking up almost half the roster, Brawl semi-clones, Smash 4's clones as full characters as well. So why is now all of a sudden different, and when half of the Echoes, especially Ken, can be argued that they stretch further away from their originals to be more unique, fighters/semi-clone-like. Ike, Robin, Corrin, and Byleth are all more or less original as far as full moveset and archetype go for a Fire Emblem character. But the surface level discontent to the clone aspect, or how similar half the Fire Emblem cast is, I promise you, it does not run that deep for a lot of people. How deep does it go? It goes something like, I mean, I like some of the Fire Emblem characters, but I kind of wish they spiced some of these up more, you know? Like, they kind of feel samey here and there, at least a little bit. Like, why is Chrom specifically an echo of Roy when he has different moves in Fire Emblem Awakening that Roy doesn't use at all, you know? Like, they're not hounding or boycotting Smash for this, I promise you. Most of the proper solid criticisms towards Fire Emblem and Smash that aren't over-exaggerations and that are relatively shallow with emotions and general dislike aren't that serious. Again, I'll expand later. Another argument with the Fire Emblem thing are the characters / games themselves, or rather the amount, which sometimes is followed up by Mario and Pokemon and how many characters they got. I'm gonna get scoffs. It's the Mario fan who hates this comparison, so no Mario bias allowed, SMT. Besides that, you get stuff like this. People talking about how now there are too many Mario characters, or Pokemon, or that people are hypocrites for calling out Fire Emblem and not Mario or Pokemon. This coupled with the point that Fire Emblem having a couple more than a dozen games total and noting its recent success. The former debate over Mario and Pokemon, again, never a thought people had until Fire Emblem was brought in the equation. First off, I get this tweet was poking fun at it. Like, oh, well, that's odd. And put a pin on me specifying how I'm sure the guy who made this didn't have any ill intentions, if at all, to Smash fans or whatever, because I'm sure he doesn't. He forgot Rosalina. Like, I don't think he meant for this to be that serious. But you still have so many people that don't take it that way. You have so many people finding tweets and threads like this, especially from people outside Smash or don't play that much, who are not going to see it as a simple joke. They take this kind of thing at face value, and some even argue unironically, with this exact basis / argument in mind, when it might not even be meant for that. And the argument itself, damn it, and on the argument, shit. And on the argument itself, people don't complain about any of the Pokemon or Mario characters, yet they do about Fire Emblem. Why is that? Are they hypocrites? Rooting this down to base surface levels, visually, no Mario character or Pokemon look the same outside Dr. Mario, Pichu, and Daisy, but again, that isn't really relevant or a major factor. Mechanically, however, most Mario characters play very distinctly from one another outside, once again, Dr. Mario and Daisy. The latter being an echo of Peach, and probably the worst offender of this, given their only difference is a singular animation giving Daisy a slightly different hurtbox. Dr. Mario originally being a clone of Mario, now is a semi-clone-esque character, given different values of speed, power, recovery, etc., and some different moves here and there. He's basically Mario, Melee Mario especially, but infinitely worse. Meanwhile, Pokemon only has one character that plays vaguely similar to another, while the rest are all original and unique, but the similar one, Pichu, still inhabiting some traits unique to him from Pikachu, like self-recoil damage, very lightweight, some different combos, slightly better kill power, etc. Most of the Mario cast and almost every single Pokemon is basically unique gameplay-wise. But people care about the character, right? So why don't people really complain about a new Pokemon or Mario character? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. It's a pretty big conundrum, but it might have something to do with the fact Mario and Pokemon are literally the biggest video game franchises in the entire world. Pokemon being a whole multimedia conglomerate. Fire Emblem's gotten more popular since the mid-2010s, sure. But if you wanted to base this off Nintendo's views or sales, Nintendo puts Fire Emblem on the same tier as Kirby or Metroid in A tier, thanks to its rising success since Awakening and especially Fire Emblem Heroes. Sales-wise, the series always floated in the hundreds of thousands, usually until Awakening passed 2 million, with Fates and Three Houses passing 3 mil, okay. But people note its ever-growing success, and when Sakurai pointed out how many games it has to try and deter any feelings against Fire Emblem, which is weird considering more than half of all the first parties in Smash have either sold just as well as Fire Emblem or have sold remarkably better with usually less games, but also are more recognizable and more popular than Fire Emblem. Donkey Kong consistently sells better, Splatoon, Animal Crossing, Yoshi, even Metroid, and to some extent Star Fox, which most of these series had different circumstances in their favor, but also less games. Like, if the sales and number of entries, if they truly were a big reason supporting Fire Emblem, then why doesn't Wario have 7 other characters then? Like, no, genuinely. Like, Wario basically has 17 games. Between Wario Land and WarioWare, it sold better than Fire Emblem. WarioWare is also pretty popular in Japan. They consistently sell solidly, and then, wait a minute, why hasn't Kirby gotten a character since Brawl? A franchise that has more games and sales. I've said this specific piece once before, this cycle video. Like, this point completely ignores the fact a majority of first-party series Nintendo has have gone on record showing greater success, consistency, and popularity compared to Fire Emblem, and some are trying to act like it's bigger than those to justify all the Fire Emblem characters when that's simply not true. That's not me trying to suck the wind out of Fire Emblem's success. I'm glad it got saved from death, I'm glad it's growing, and I could probably agree. Awakening and Three Houses are great games, even though I haven't played them yet. My point is, a lot of the franchises I listed, regardless of tier or priority set by Nintendo, are literally bigger than Fire Emblem. And when you're comparing Fire Emblem's amount of anything in conjunction to its growing popularity to Nintendo's flagship IP that is Mario, and a conglomerate like Pokémon that both make billions of dollars, why is this even a comparison to begin with? That, and when people make this comparison, they group the Mario characters that aren't of the Mario section in Smash, DK, Diddy, K. Rool, Yoshi, Wario, and add the coupling sometimes, ignoring how Smash distributes and identifies its series and characters, and as always pushing a very narrow, skewed narrative that isn't true most of the time. It's laughable. Like the tweet I brought up earlier, people do share that one unironically as a counter to the Fire Emblem hate, but ignore Rosalina in on there. Every coupling makes up Bowser Jr. only. Or how Smash identifies Wario, Yoshi, and DK as separate. Every time we circle back to the Fire Emblem drama, the people they claim are acting toxic take up a small, minute portion of the fanbase in reality, and those people making those claims sometimes do it for memes and jokes, but other times do it and get others to do it out of spite and pushing corny-ass agendas that aren't even that accurate nor matter much at all. Like, do you genuinely care there are that many swordies in the game? You think there are a ton of people out there always ready to bitch about Fire Emblem and lynch Sakurai whenever given the chance or not? Like, seriously, as if they wanted to throw out how much they hate it that badly, and if they truly hate Sakurai, Ultimate, Smash, Fire Emblem fans, whatever. Because I'm pretty sure that's not a ton of people. And when some people post these for jokes and memes, it's one thing. Again, some people that do these have good intentions sometimes, just poking fun with little ill will, if at all. That's whatever. But my problem is when you have these blow up so hard, get tens of thousands of retweets, likes, and shares across the internet beyond Twitter, many commenting how they feel the same over it, and people talking about it over and over again and again, bi-weekly, when you have news outlets making articles and talking about it, and about random Smash mods about Fire Emblem just to get a reaction out of them in easy clicks, you're giving more and more people a false perception and pushing the false narrative that there's a slew of toxic Smash fans, making up the majority that have it out for this specific franchise, the mean and ridiculous comments spoken by a handful of people, taken by those who see it and inflate them to be narrated as essentially the general community as a whole, that there's a slew of Fire Emblem fans who get bullied over a video game based on account, they just happen to like it, when it's not even directed at them, only the series or character, and the idea the only hate towards Fire Emblem are all these surface level, flawed claims that people boast of, from memes to acting as the majority, when it's still always been a minority opinion. Forget most that talk about these acknowledge they sound and are stupid. Like, what's the point? If people know how stupid this topic is and how dumb some of these arguments are, why do we keep going back? That's kind of a whole problem Smash Twitter has itself, some social media too. It regurgitates the same exact topics or questions like Fire Emblem, sacrifice less, cut your least favorite DLC, one has to go, like it's all the same stuff. That's its own repetitive problem, but beyond that, specifically on Fire Emblem itself, it's to a point where it's a mishmash of false narratives and claims over matters that don't even matter. So what am I saying with all this? So what exactly are these claims then, and what are the actual underlying gripes people have with Fire Emblem and Smash? Before that, let me specify what I said during the too many sword portion. Not only do most people love a lot of sword fighters in this game, even some of the Fire Emblem characters as well. Marth is like the face of the series at this point because of Smash. People recognize him from Melee, and people like his character in Fire Emblem itself. Roy's similar, even with his clone status. His popularity universally largely comes from Smash itself. Ike is another fan favorite. People like Path of Radiance, people like Radiant Dawn, people like his character and character design, people like his kit, we like Ike. Robin, again, very similar. Awakening is the game that saved the franchise from death. People like Robin's character and traits as a fighter, being a mage. He comes from a critically acclaimed Fire Emblem and was met with great reception as a newcomer. Even when you look at Lucina and Chrom, most didn't mind their inclusion and is another Robin scenario. Lucina at the time was another Awakening character, another fan favorite that came from the biggest Fire Emblem game at the time. Chrom being effectively the exact same case, only being expected as a character which wouldn't be realized until Ultimate. On God, most people are fine or even like most of these Fire Emblem characters. The problems and hate people have with Fire Emblem all stem from these two assholes. These two assholes specifically. Asshole. Yeah, it is largely you. But Byleth and Corrin are guaranteed to be the source of all the controversy surrounding Fire Emblem. Byleth, personally, is a victim of extremely poor timing as far as Fire Emblem DLC. Moveset-wise, he's great. He's kind of a mid-tier, but the character actually represents Fire Emblem's main weapon triangle. He comes from the biggest Fire Emblem game, period. Most people adore Three Houses. At least he makes sense being in Smash as a Smash character. The issue people have is he's both another Fire Emblem character that is DLC, and he came towards the end of a Fighter's Pass that was nothing but third-party characters. Big, bizarre characters like Persona 5's Joker, Banjo-Kazooie. There was a constant theme with the pass, and there was probably a chance that would have been all the DLC Smash got, but then they ended on another Fire Emblem character. Again, I personally think Violet's fine. If he/she was added either earlier in the pass or in Fighter's Pass 2, I guarantee the reception would have been significantly better. But Byleth was the most controversial character due to the fact that Fire Emblem was a franchise that kept getting more and more characters with each Smash game and kept getting DLC characters, and Nintendo wanted to keep pushing it. It was a negative precedent that set Byleth's reveal up for disaster. But who was the one that set that precedent? Corrin. And at least Byleth's inclusion makes sense on account Three Houses is the biggest Fire Emblem game in every way, and the character's the poster boy / main pro tag, on top of Nintendo being the ones choosing all the DLC characters so far. But almost nothing good came out of Corrin's edition. Fates sold well, it also sold 3 million, but not only does that get foggy when you notice Fates is a game that's split between 3 versions. They pulled a Pokémon with Fates, but Fates is also a controversial Fire Emblem game. I've seen plenty of people who play Fates say it's ass, or a specific version is solid, but the other version is garbage. Like, even with its success, people generally don't like Fates. Even when he was added, Sakurai mentioned he wanted one DLC character to be from a recently released game, but not only did he mention himself, he felt they were adding too many Fire Emblem characters at that time. Fates didn't even come out internationally at that point. When Corrin was added, almost no one outside Japan knew who the heck he was. They just knew it was a Fire Emblem character for a new Fire Emblem game that Sakurai was convinced would make for an interesting fighter via his staff. Smash inherently has a marketing nature with its newcomers. Those newcomers come from big or interesting games. People get into those games and characters because of Smash. Every character has this effect. But Corrin felt like that was the only reason why they added him. This guy was the straw that broke the camel's back. Corrin specifically is what started it all, and if you've been with my channel since 2016, then you already know how much I despise this character. Ultimate's main draw is everyone is here, so me and others give specific disliked characters some slack, because that's the appeal, we get it. And this take is a lot more subjective, but Corrin, in my opinion, did not add anything to Smash. Yeah, he's contradicting himself, hitting on repetitive posts, yet he's taking part right now, sacrificing a character, contrarian, hypocrite, whatever I don't care. And this is besides the point. But if there was any character I would cut and would feel next to nothing of value would be lost, it'd be Piranha Plant and Corrin. Plant's a basic Mario enemy. His whole inclusion was to be the antithesis to Smash's trend of adding big named characters, big heroes, villains, and such. But Corrin is just another Fire Emblem character who isn't even that popular or beloved compared to literally every other Fire Emblem character in the game. He has his fans. Don't get me wrong, and this isn't me shaming Corrin fans, but the fact is Fates is one of the most controversial Fire Emblem games out there. He's one of the poster boys of a franchise that was growing but was announced during a time where basically Japan only knew who he was. Melee was the carriage for Marth, Roy, and Fire Emblem itself into the West, which was still a budding series internationally, only seeing an audience in Japan at the time, so no one cared about it then. And again, every character in Smash has a marketability effect, even with the Awakening characters to where it felt right and had time between it and Smash to be given that limelight. But that's the difference. It had the time to sit right with people. Awakening was out for 2 years prior to Robin and Lucina, which usually is the sweet spot for most first parties. When you're adding characters from games that have only been out for months, one of which was Japan exclusive at the time, it only feels like they're added solely to be a commercial and not for being a poster boy when you already have several for that series. Byleth is at least cushioned by Three Houses status as a fantastic game, but it's effectively the same thing, especially when Sakurai had to play an early build of Three Houses to formulate Byleth's moveset. It's that timing that makes it stick out more in Fire Emblem's case. Fire Emblem on average gets 2 new characters per Smash game now, 2 in Melee, 1 in Brawl, 3 in Smash 4 with 1 that was cut returning, and now 2 in Ultimate. Sakurai himself even acknowledged Fire Emblem was getting a lot of characters at that time, because even though Fire Emblem was growing, again, Smash 4 added 2 and brought back 1 that was cut. Everyone felt Fire Emblem was sitting just comfortably and rightfully so, which it basically was. And then Corrin went and changed all that. So, if Sakurai felt there were too many at that point, you know there's an underlying issue people have with Fire Emblem and some of the characters it's added in recent years. The too many swords, too many clones, too many Fire Emblem. All the memes, jokes, drama, it all started with Corrin. There never were too many swordsmen or anime swords in Smash. This and the other aforementioned claims have always been memes, if not vocal minority opinions, that people just took at face value and are now overblowing them to the point of generalization and making people think it's the majority, whilst taking it to heart when most simply don't care all that much. Many people, and even some Fire Emblem fans, feel Sothis' comment on too many swords in Byleth's trailer was just cheeky and insulting, as it glosses over all the actual gripes people have with Fire Emblem while focusing and over-magnifying all the bad ones. As far as the core actual gripes people have with Fire Emblem go, the actual good reasons people should know of and mention whenever this topic arises again, people just felt Fire Emblem got characters in Smash too fast once Smash DLC came around. This, in conjunction with how little other, more popular series got characters, or how slow per game compared to Fire Emblem, like Kirby, Donkey Kong, Metroid, Star Fox, Sonic, Zelda, etc. People have wanted some characters from these, like Dixie Kong, Crystal, Skull Kid, Girahim, Magolor, Bandana D, etc., and other unmentioned characters in franchises for a while. Franchises that are either as good / successful, if not significantly more than Fire Emblem, yet they haven't gotten many new characters or additions since Brawl. For the most part, DK and Metroid didn't get their due until Ultimate, every other Smash game basically. I guarantee you, most call BS on the 16 game thing and FE's recent success justifying its rapid character growth, when Zelda, a series vastly bigger than Fire Emblem, has less characters and half of those are Links. When some of Nintendo's other, bigger, noteworthy IPs aren't getting much over the years in Smash as far as characters, yet Fire Emblem's been getting so many characters, songs, and representation in general, when it's only recently hit the big time, there are going to be some people who feel Fire Emblem's a little oversaturated. Sometimes it's not even the amount and rate of characters per franchise. Some people may also feel Fire Emblem's representation in Smash poorly demonstrates how Fire Emblem characters work, or how poorly its weapon triangle and mechanics are shown. Hence the meme of Marth clones, and why me and some others are fine with Byleth. Fire Emblem has bow users, lance users, axes, mages, healers, dragons, etc., yet every Fire Emblem character in Smash is of a sword class. For other people, it could be the personality of some of these characters, but honestly, you could say that about several Smash characters like Ryu, Steve, Hero, Olimar, Pokemon Trainer, a couple others, them either inhibiting personalities as deep as a piece of cardboard or being corny in Trainer's case. No, people don't see every individual Fire Emblem character as a total Marth clone. That's another meme taken out of context to push a narrative. They may not like how samey some of them look or feel, or how adding a sword character stilts some of that creativity and intrigue, but that's not them completely writing off swords or clones as bad and deserving of a boycott. No, people who don't mind a new Pokemon or Mario character as much in comparison aren't hypocrites when they're the biggest video game franchises in all of gaming, and when they may be more interesting mechanically. Corrin, and especially Byleth, are victims of being added to Smash at the wrong time. Being added amongst DLC that heavily favored and introduced popular, interesting third parties, and the tonal whiplash was very jarring for some. Especially in Corrin's case, it was a myriad of small, little things about Fire Emblem, such as the amount of characters being compared to other franchises, the swords, the timing, the DLC, and whatnot, between both Smash 4 and Ultimate, that they all snowballed into bigger forms that more people caught onto and took issue with. And when Smash has all these amazing characters like Ridley, K. Rool, Banjo, Steve, Sephiroth, and whatnot, yet Nintendo in some cases still has that overt favoritism towards Fire Emblem, and it highlights an imbalance of attention, recognition, implementation among other characteristics, you're gonna have people point that out and want more of an even balance. All the meme complaints surrounding Fire Emblem have always been just that, if not vocal minority complaints that people need to understand. They never took up the majority of Smash fans to a toxic amount. That's how it is in most, if not any, fanbase. But above all else, every single valid complaint, and sometimes even the flawed meme ones, were never that massive deals for most people. Yeah, me and others wish we got at least one less Fire Emblem character. We may feel some of them look or play similar. We may feel they're poorly mechanically represented for the series. We may feel other franchises keep getting the short end of the stick. We may feel it's unfair to say Fire Emblem's growing and getting bigger when other series have been bigger. We may make jokes and memes about the Fire Emblem shenanigans, but in the grand scheme, a lot of people on any side of it genuinely do not care that much. A lot of people still love Smash. They still respect Sakurai. They still love Smash Ultimate, Smash in general, and many different things about it. All of these are mild gripes and criticisms, at best, that hardly affect the design of Smash itself, just the character selection process, the implementation and representation in general. These were never make or break situations where people were writing off Smash as poorly designed or harassing Sakurai in massive groups or anything major. Like, it was never that serious. But people make tweets like the aforementioned, articles aforementioned, threads and whatnot, and they spread like wildfire, and it's disturbing how there comes a ton of people thinking it's a vast blind rage over something that trivial when it never was, but it's especially exhausting. My biggest problem with the entire Fire Emblem fiasco amidst these is that despite I explained all the various reasons people are against Fire Emblem's representation in Smash, all the memes and how they're flawed when used unironically, whenever we circle back to the Fire Emblem drama, I don't care. Someone makes a tweet pushing a corny narrative people think that there are too many Marth clones when that's untrue, and a false argument in question as well as the narrative, and many people share the I don't care. Someone doesn't like how they hate Byleth and Corrin unjustly because Fire Emblem's an A-tier friend. I don't care. Someone expresses how they hate Byleth or Corrin. I don't care. Someone makes an article on how someone modded out the Fire Emblem character. I don't care, bro. Why are there articles on Fire Emblem mods in Smash when most people deep down don't give two shits? 10% of Smash fans at best are thinking / going to mod their games. The vast majority of Smash fans aren't. And they're 100% optional. Why are there articles of this when most news outlets don't even talk Smash mods? Why are so many people sharing this around, acting like the community's being wholly toxic again, when most fans don't even mod their games? It's always a corny false narrative, it's always playing semantics, it's always the same exact standard Fire Emblem bullshit whenever people bring it up on social media, and I'm just tired. I'm so exhausted of seeing it pop back up over and over bi-weekly online, because it always amounts to the same thing. A vocal minority gets blown out of proportion to push someone's agenda, it catches on, it spreads hard, some stand that narrative, while others line out X or Y reason people dislike Fire Emblem's representation in Smash. One side completely ignores the other in favor of their own view, regardless of which side, then they claim that singular interaction as most Smash fans, and it's the same black and white back and forth we've been dealing with since Smash 4. I wish people talked more about why people dislike it, because there are good, legitimate reasons as I specified earlier, but people need to understand both, that that's not them trying to write off Smash as bad or Sakurai when it often isn't Sakurai choosing the characters, but also gratefulness never was nor should be a necessity or obligation over simple character implementation processes. Literal, simple criticism separate from the actual game design over a product people are buying. People need to understand, as talented as Sakurai is, this has always been consumers discussing and consuming products. They have the right to criticize that product if something about it at all is off. And even in the case of Fire Emblem, even other characters people may dislike, like Min Min, Pyra/Mithra, etc., they have the right to do so, especially if the reason is good. A lot of the bad reasons keep getting overblown and are taken at face value by more than one would assume, and it's really annoying and tiring having to line out the same reasons over why some may dislike FE and Smash, alongside doing the same song and dance at, oh, Smash fans are toxic, they hate Fire Emblem and are inconsiderate, and oh, Fire Emblem fans are toxic, they only want Fire Emblem and are inconsiderate. Like, bro, who cares? Who cares? Bro, who cares? Who actually cares? I want to move on from this. Please, can we talk about something different? Because every time we revisit this, it's never any different. When can we talk about something different or fun? Whenever we revisit Fire Emblem, I wish it's between people trying to really understand it and not make blanket assumptions, but I know for a fact that it won't, because it's always the same thing, over and over, and I wish we would just move on, period. I don't care if you're a Smash fan who dislikes Fire Emblem, I don't care if you're a Fire Emblem fan who feels bullied when it's towards the character, not you specifically. I don't care if I hate Corrin anymore, to be honest. I just want to move on, you know? I say this like I've made a lot of videos on this. I've only made one. I may have revisited this once or twice in video form. It's just something I see a lot on Twitter. And yeah, I need to stop doing Twitter a lot, I know. Can we move on? Can we move on as I move on to thank you guys for watching this? Especially since it's only just a rant. No, seriously, thank you so much for watching this, as with any of my videos. And I hope you guys stick around for more Smash-related videos, whether discussions, streams, guides, montages, and other gaming videos. Stay super.
Yo, hey, man, hey, 过来呀，不不。